Obligatory mic check. Mic check again. And check that. Check again. Okay, we're not going to waste too much time tonight. We got stuff to do. Tonight is going to be part 2 of my journey learning Go programming language. So we're going to carry on with the example that we had from last time. So we had FreeCodeCamp, Go, and React Full Stack app that we're going to go through. It was nearing the end of that, so we'll probably watch the end of that, and then we'll get a chance to go into Go for Absolute Beginners 4-hour course, watch the majority of that here, and then the rest of it next week. Full course might be a little bit too much. 9 hours to go through, that's going to take a few weeks. So I think what we'll do is commit to finishing this one and this one, and then what we'll do is we'll go back to Melky's video about doing practical examples. So yeah, like I remember him mentioning about Go by example. So what we could probably do is we'll probably end up cloning this to our own thing or forking it and kind of going from there. But tonight we're just still watching things, so let's go through the stuff. Load it up. Oops, forgot to change the sound. Here we go.
If you visit TenStack query, here you can see the entire documentation, and basically we'd like to use this as our data fetching solution. And here you can see the motivation behind it, and like it just gives you a lot of different things out of the box that you could use. Things like caching, deduping, updating out of date data in the background, and lots of other things. And I think it's such a great library to use. And at the end of the day, you would like to use it in your so to say production ready applications, because that's going to give you lots of different functionalities that you don't really want to reinvent. So the very first thing that we would like to do is just install it. So let's take a look at from the documentation. If we go into the installation, we should be able to see this command, right? I will copy it and paste it in my terminal and just make sure it is under the client. So I'll just paste that and install it. And while it installs in the background, let's go ahead into the quick start. You could take a look at it, how they're going to set it up, or you could just trust me and see my guide. So this is something, again, I took from documentation, where you'd like to create a query client and import it from our package, and we'd like to wrap our application with it so that we could use this query client in our application. And you'll see what that is going to provide, right? So I'll just say query client provider, and then just wrap my entire application with it. So let's import that one as well. Okay, with that, now we should be able to send requests to our database or our backend, right? So we're gonna go into the, let's start with, I think, to-do list, where we can just fetch all the to-dos that we have in the database. And before we start doing that, let's just create a type. So export type, let's say to-do, and we'll just say each to-do is going to have this underscore ID field, type of number, body of string, and then completed is going to be Boolean. And in the to-do item, when we say we're getting this to-do, let's say the type is going to be this to-do that we are exporting from this file. Okay, and I think we could delete this to-dos now, and instead we're just going to fetch that. Okay, so instead of this fake data, let's try to fetch it. So when you want to fetch some data in React Query, you would use query hook, okay, which is gonna take the first argument as this object, and we're gonna pass the query key, and you'll see what that is going to do in a second. But basically this is like an identifier for this query, and when you want to refetch data for this one, we're just gonna say fetch the query that has this query key of to-dos, and that's going to do it. So again, you'll just see that in action in a couple of minutes. Let's say we're gonna have the query function where we'll have try and catch. In the try, we'll say const res await fetch, where our endpoint was, let's say, http localhost 5000 /API /todos, and we're gonna get a response, a data back, and we could just say if response is not okay, then just throw this data.message. That's not going to be data.message, but it's going to be error because this is what we are returning from the backend, right? And in the catch, we could maybe just console log the error. And then here I'll just say return the data, and if you don't have anything, then just return an empty array. Here we need to...
I knew I was underwater. I just didn't realize I was this underwater.
So this is going to give us a value, let's say const data, which is the to-dos. I'll just rename it to be to-dos. So just to make our code a little bit more readable, and instead of this fake use state, I'll just say is loading is going to be dynamic. And here now it just want us to put some value, right? So this is a generic. Here we'll just say this is going to return us a to-do, an array of to-dos. So just like that, let's delete this one. In here, so for some reason it says property data does not exist on type string. So let's see why this is the case. So we say use query, we just get that not from Chakra UI, but that should be coming from the 10stack query. So just like that, it should fix it, where we just fetch our to-dos from the backend, and if it is not okay, we'll just throw that, console log it, and otherwise we'll just say return the data. But if we just save it like that, we're gonna get a course error, right? Let's just see in the console. Let me just zoom in a little bit. Okay, refresh. Oh, okay, so we don't even have our server is up and running. So I'll just kill this client and open up a new one, and I'll just say error. And just make sure you're not in the client directory, but in the root. So there you go. Now it says it is watching those changes, but I don't think if it is correct, because we said that exclude the client folder. So whenever you change something here, it is not going to restart the server, but I just don't know why it says watching. And here we have connected to MongoDB Atlas. Let's send a request. We got the course error where it just says you cannot send a request from this URL to localhost 5000. And to be able to fix it, let's go ahead and just add the course to our Go server. So in main.go, we would like to add course after maybe before these requests. So here I'll just say app.use, and we'll just say course, and make sure you import it from Fiber middleware, and I'll just say new. We would like to say course.config, and it's going to take this kind of like an object where we'll just say allow origins of, let's say, HTTP localhost of 5173, which is going to be our front-end application, and we'll just say allow headers to be origin content type, and make sure you put a dash and then the accept. So if you save that now, it should hopefully restart our server and we should be able to fetch data. Let's just send again. So I think it just tries to restart. Let's just see. Okay, it is up and running. And if we just send that, there we go. Now we have Learn Go and Learn React, which is in our database, and they are not completed. That's why we just see that as this kind of in progress. And here we just say you need to add a key. Let's kill this one. And in the to-do list, we're gonna add this underscore ID. So here we already have it. Why do we get that? So under the to-do list, it says they should have a unique key prop, and it is coming from line 56. So that should normally work, but for now, let's just say IDX, and we just put the index just like that. And if we just refresh, we don't have that error, and we just fetch our data. So the very next thing that I would like to implement is when I click to that, I just want to mark it as completed. Let's go into the to-do item, right? When I click to this check circle, so I'll just say on click, let's just say update to-do function. And before we write that, let me just quickly explain what we have done here. Basically, whenever we render this to-do list, we are calling this use query, which is going to send a fetch request to our endpoint, and it's going to give us the data back, which we called it as to-dos, and we are mapping it with each to-do item, and we pass this to-do into that component, and we are just using it in here, right? And now we'd like to just update a to-do, and for that we'll be using mutation hook. So here I'll just go ahead and say use mutation, which is coming from 10stack, and here this is going to return us a mutate function, right? So let's say mutate, and I'll just rename it to be update to do, and it's going to give us is pending.
I figure I need to get that
State, and I'll just call it as is updating, just to make my code a little bit more readable. And here this is going to take again an object where we could give a mutation key. So mutation key, that's going to be, let's say, update to do, and the most important thing is to have this mutation function, which is going to be async, and we'll say if to do is completed, then we'll just say return out of this function with this alert, where we'll just say let's say not task, but let's say to do is already completed, and we're gonna have the try catch. So try catch, and in the try we're gonna just send a request to our endpoint. So instead of always typing this localhost 5000, what I'll be doing is to create a base URL. And for that, let's go into the app.tsx, and I'll say export const base underscore URL, which is going to be on this port /API. Okay, so instead of using always this value, I'll just use this constant, and let's save it like that. And I'll just put it like this, right? This is my base URL, which ends with /API, and I'll just say /todos and then the to-do ID. This is the to-do that I would like to mark as completed. Then I'll say my method is going to be patch, and headers is going to be content type of application JSON. And I think we don't even need to pass it because it is going to update it, right? It's going to make that completed field to be true. And I'll say const data res.json, and if response is not okay, just maybe throw an error and return the data otherwise. Here we could just say console log the error itself. And let's save. So while we're updating, we could show some kind of like loading state, just like in the demo application. So if I clicked that, here you can see I have that loading spinner for a second. And let's go ahead and add it. Here I will cut that. I'll say if it is not pending, or I'm sorry, if it is not updating, this is how we have called it, then we would like to show this. But else, if it is updating, then I'll just say give me this spinner from Chakra UI, and let's say size is going to be small. Okay, so we have some kind of like warning from TypeScript. Let's just say, just call it like that. Okay, instead of giving a reference, we'll just say the callback function is going to be this update to do when you click to this box. Let's see this in action. Here I'll just say learn Go is completed. So it says invalid to do ID. And let's see why this is the case. So to do underscore ID is not working for some reason. Let's say console.log the to do and just see that in console. Okay, so it has the ID field, and I think we forgot to update it in the like main.go. I'll just say main.go. Here, this should be called as underscore ID. And this is something I forgot, so I just realized. Sorry about that. Save it. It's going to restart our server, and let's just wait for a second. So I'll just go ahead and refresh it. Okay, let's just refresh it again until our server is up and running. There we go. Now we have the underscore ID field. And if I click to that, there we go. It has been updated, but we need to refresh it to be able to see it. Here you can see it just says now this has been completed. And so let's implement this. When we click to that, it should immediately refetch the new state. So we don't really need to refresh the page to be able to see it. And this is where that query key is gonna come into play. So we will say, once you have completed this successfully, I'll say on success, then you would like to run this function where you would like to invalidate some queries. So I know this looks a little bit weird, but just bear with me. We'll say query client and get that from this hook. Okay, so we'd like to just refetch some queries. I'll say query client dot invalidate queries, and the one that we'd like to update or invalidate, first just pass an empty object, and we'll say query key is going to be this array to-dos. Okay, so we had this query key in this to-do list when we try to fetch all of our to-dos, right? This is our query key. And when we say, once you update it, just try to refetch this data. Okay, so let's try to see that. I'll just refresh. And if I clicked this, it's going to update, and there you go, because it refetched it immediately once this is done successfully. And the other thing we'd like to implement is to create a to-do. Let's for that go into the to-do form. And before that, instead of passing this index, right, I'll just delete that and I'll put to-do dot underscore ID, and now it should work because this is something that we have fixed in main.go file. I'll go into the to-do form and
stop using your own money. On developments like this, you'll run out of it eventually.
So we are storing this when we type into the input. And when we submit this form, we are calling this function, which should actually create a to-do with the help of use mutation. So I'll just delete this function, and I'll actually get that from the use mutation, right? And make sure you import that from 10stack query. And I'll say const, this is going to give me a mutate function, which I would like to call it as create to do. So this is how we would rename it. And then is pending state, where I would like to call it as maybe is creating, or we could just leave it as pending in this case. It is just preference, but I would always like to go with some kind of a custom name so that I could just know what is going on. Is creating, just like that. And here we'd like to pass maybe a mutation key just in case we use it, and then a mutation function, which is going to take the event, right? Because this is a submit handler, and we'll just say e.prevent default so that it doesn't refresh the page. And then we are going to have the try catch, and I'm not sure why this is not happy with us. So maybe we are not returning something. Let's see. Okay, let's just try to see how this will end up. In the try, we're going to have const res await, again fetch the base URL, let's import it, and so /API/todos, we would like to just pass the method as well as the body of the to-do. I'll just say method is going to be post, headers is going to be content type application JSON, and then stringify the body, which is this new to-do string. And we're going to get data out of it. And then we'll just say if response is not okay, just say something went wrong or throw the error. And we would like to say set new to do to be an empty string, is because here, let's take a look at the demo. I'll just say something here. Once I press to this button, it's going to create it, and now it is going to reset this field. So that's why we're using it. And eventually we'll just say return data. In the catch, we could just say throw new error, and here we're gonna have, after this, let's say on success. So I'll just put a comma, and on success, once we have created a to-do successfully, we would like to refetch all to-dos just like we have done previously. And for that, we need to get the query key, and I think we need to say this E will be so react dot form event. And now this should be happy with us. And let's say error is going to be type of any. Okay, so let's go ahead and say const, I'll just give a little bit spacing, query client, get that, and we're going to just refetch it. So I'll say query client invalidate queries. We would like to just refetch to-dos, and if there is an error, so on error, we'll just say alert, maybe error D message. And here this is coming from ESLint, so I'll just say quick fix. Okay, so we'll just disabling that. It's really annoying, but okay, for now let's just keep it like that. And when we in the loading state, let's say is creating, then show this spinner, but else show that plus icon. Okay, hopefully this should be our function. Let's test it out. I'll just say learn Python and send that. There we go. Now we have created that one, and as soon as that is being created, we just invalidate our to-do queries so that it could refetch that. And here you can just double check it. If you go here, I'll just clear everything, and I'll just say learn C++, and once I send it, it's going to first create that one. This is the post request, and then it is going to fetch it, right? So here we can see it is going to send a fetch request to API to-dos, which is going to be get method. And here this is the post where we can create the to-do. Now we can mark it as completed. And I think we didn't implement the delete function, and we're going to add that next. But if you were to just take a look at the code, pretty simple, right? Nothing complex going on. We're just preventing the default, sending a request with our to-do body, and we're just doing some kind of error handling, and then just return the data on success and on error cases. And let's go ahead and implement the delete to-do. That's going to be looking pretty similar to this function. We could probably make this a little bit more reusable, but I'll just go with the simpler approach, where I'll just type it again from scratch, just to make it kind of like beginner friendly. And feel free to optimize this code. So again, we're gonna have delete to do whenever we click to this box. Okay, I'll just get that, paste it. This is gonna be calling the delete to do function, and we'll say
Would you buy a gym membership in one place?
If it is not deleting, so here, if it is not deleting state, then show the delete icon, but else we would like to just show this spinner just like this. And let's go ahead and implement our function. So here, I think I'll just let the Copilot do the magic, where we're going to have a mutation key, a mutation function, which is going to be async. We are sending a fetch request to our base URL and the to-do that we would like to delete. This is our method. We are doing some error handling and returning the data. And in the catch case, we're just console logging it. And let's save and let's just try to see in action. But before that, I think we need to add this on success case as well to be able to invalidate queries. Because if we don't add it, let's try to delete this one. It has been deleted, but I can only see that if I refresh. And to be able to fix it, we're going to go ahead and add the on success. And let's just try to delete this one. There you go. They have all been deleted. And now we just see all tasks completed. And it's because in the to-do list, we just say that if it is not loading and if the length of to-dos is equal to 0, then just show this text with the image. So I think we have implemented almost everything to this application, right? We can create a to-do. Let's just say watch a Go tutorial and create that one. And let's say watch a React tutorial and add that one. Let's say do laundry and let's say buy groceries. So we have added all of them and we can mark them as done. We could delete them and just fetch all of them, right? And here we have the light and dark mode, and there you go. Now light mode looks pretty ugly. You can't really read this and it is not really accessible. So let's go ahead and fix it. And for that, I think I'll just go into the source. I'll create a folder called Chakra where I could put my theme into it. So I'll say theme.ts. So here, this is a file that you could learn more about in the documentation. So that's why I'll just go ahead and paste this code, which is about like 20 lines of code, where we have the initial color mode as being dark, and it's going to use the system color mode. And here we just say the background color on the light mode is going to be this one, and in the dark mode just keep the default one. So to be able to use this, we're going to go into the main.tsx. into the Chakra provider, we'll just say theme is going to be this theme that we'll just that we have just created, and it is not going to be coming from this one, but let's just see, it is going to be coming from this theme.ts file that we have just added. Let's save and see this in action.
Job done. Perfect. So we have a beautiful.
And now there we go. We have this kind of like a little bit more soft background. And if you don't like the way this looks, just feel free to update it. But with that, I think that's going to be it for the client. Now we have this kind of like hard-coded variable, right? And it is actually fine, but when we go into the production and development, this should be dynamic, right? It's because when we deploy this application, we're gonna have the both backend and client in the same root. So let's say currently we have our backend in this URL, right? And we're gonna have the client under the same URL as well, because this is how we'll deploy that. And once we have at this, we are not gonna need any CORS handling as well, because both the backend and the client will be in the same URL, right? In the same domain. That's why I'll just go ahead and update this a little bit. So I'll say import.meta.env.mode. If it is equal to development, then this is going to be our URL. So let me just zoom out a little bit so that you could see the entire screen. And if we are in the production, then we'll just send whatever the domain of whatever the domain is /API. And I think this is going to be a little bit more clear once we add this main.go file, right? So here, first things first, we don't actually want to handle, let's see, where's that course kind of thing. So in production, we don't really want to have this because, as I said before, our client and backend will be served under the same domain. To be able to make that work, we need to make this client folder to be static. So after this port, I'll go ahead and I'll say if os, let's say os.get env environment, if this is equal to production, then we'd like to make the client folder to be our static assets so that we could run and show our React application. So I'll say app.static. When we hit this root route, we'll just show, let's say, this client dist folder, which is going to have our built optimized version of React application. And we'll just see that in a second. Okay, so when you send a request to API to-dos, in like all these endpoints, you're gonna actually call the handler functions, but any routes other than these is going to trigger this React application under the dist folder in client. And we don't have this environment variable, so for now let's go ahead and add it to be development. Okay, so that we are in development, and now we're gonna deploy in a couple of minutes, and it's going to be production, so we're gonna make that to be static. And the other thing that we'd like to update is that we can't really load the .env file in production because we're not going to have that file in the production environment, but instead we're going to have environment variables that we will put from the dashboard. So we'll say if, again, os.get env, if it is equal to, let's say, env, let's say if it is not equal to production, then we would like to actually load the environment variables. So I'll just put a comment. So it is pretty self-explanatory, but let's just have this comment where we would like to load the env file if we are not in the production. Now let's save this one, and we're gonna go ahead, kill our maybe the server, and then for the client, let's kill this, and we're gonna say npm run build. And this is going to create a dist folder, which is going to be that optimized version of our React application. And something that I want to change while this happening, I'll just not ignore this dist folder, and I would like to have it in my GitHub repo so that when I push any change, it could take it and like just deploy my React application. So this is not really the best approach, but it is gonna work in our case, and I found this to be the easiest to work with Railway. So there we go. Now we have the dist folder, which is gonna hold the optimized build of our React application. Now if we just kill the client, we can just say air to be able to start our backend server. So here it is up and running. We're connected to MongoDB Atlas, and let's visit localhost 5000/API/todos. And there we go. Now we can see all of our to-dos that we have. Since we are not in the production, we can't really see the React application that we have, but now we are going to deploy that, and you'll see it is going to work. So let's go ahead and push this code to the GitHub so that we could deploy it. So here I am in my GitHub account where I'll just create a repo. I'll say React Go tutorial, and that was the module name that I have give at the beginning of the video. So tutorial, just like that. And let's say create the repo. I'll just make it private, and once I publish this video, that's going to be public, so you'll just see that to be public. And if you don't really want to go with private, then just select public. So I'll go with this option. I'll say create the repo.
I knew I was underwater. I just didn't realize I was this underwater.
And now I'd like to just push an existing repo from the command line. So I'll just copy all these commands. And first I want to add my changes, right? So here we can see I have everything, and let's add them to the staging area. And just make sure you are not ignoring the dist folder. And I think I just forgot to update one thing. So in the index.html, let's just say let's just say Go, React, and TypeScript, where I'll just say for the favicon, I'll just put this golang.png. So golang dot, not svg, but png. And once we have done that, we should cd into the client first, and let's say npm run build. Whenever you change something in the client, you need to run this to get the latest version of this dist folder. Okay, so let's just wait for it until it's been built again. So there you go, it has been added. Let's just add those to the staging area as well. So these are our changes. So stage all of them, and I'll just put a commit message. So this is my commit message, third section completed, and it is ready for deployment. I'll just commit that, and I'll just go into the root, and let's just copy this and paste it, which is going to push this local repo to the GitHub repo that I have. And if we just refresh, there we go. This is the application or the source code that we just have. And to be able to deploy this, we'll be using Railway. So head over to the railway.app, and if you don't have an account, create one for free, which is going to give you $5 that you could use as the trial plan. So I've been using, I think, over the last 1 week, and it just charged me 3 cents, which is pretty convenient. Let's go into the dashboard, where we would like to just start a new project. So I'll just say new project, deploy from my GitHub repo, and this is the very last repo that I have just created, and it is private. So I'll just select that one, and I'll say deploy now. So here it's going to initialize it and try to deploy that. And while it's done, while it tries to deploy, we need to add a couple of different environment variables. So the first one is going to be env, and here we're in the production. Let's add that. The other one is going to be MongoDB _ URI, right? We need to get that connection string and then just paste it so that we could connect to our database. So I'll copy that and paste it. Now we don't really want to put port because Railway doesn't really want you to put that port. It is going to figure it out himself, okay, or itself. Let's just deploy that. These are the changes that we have just made. Env is production, and this is our connection string. So it's going to redeploy the latest change that you have done. Let's just wait, and hopefully it should deploy without any errors. And if we have, we'll just try to figure that out. So it just looks like the latest one is active. Now we could go into the, I think that should be settings. And for the deploy, maybe in the networking. So, okay, we'll just say generate a domain for us. And if we just wait a little bit, it's going to give us this URL. Let's click to it. Okay, there is nothing here yet. Let's just wait a little bit, and then hopefully it should be up and running. So here I'm just keep refreshing, and it just says not found, but it should be up in a couple of minutes. And if you go into the deployments, like you could see the latest one has been removed, and this is the latest one that we have. And you could just see the deploy logs where it just says hello world connected to MongoDB Atlas. And this is the port that Railway just figured it out because we didn't pass into the variables. And I think if you put that, it's gonna not be really happy. So let's just refresh a couple of times, and there we go. So we have the loading state, it connected to our database. Let's just, why don't we have anything? So for some reason it failed to fetch. Let's just refresh. Okay, so it says localhost 5000 API to-dos, which is not really the correct URL because we are not on localhost anymore. And there must be some bug in this app.tsx. So here we just say if the mode is development, then this is going to be our base URL, but else this is gonna be. I think at some point we should be using this localhost value, maybe in our to-do list. Okay, there you go. I forgot to update this part, right? I'll just delete this, where I'll just say base URL and plus the to-dos. Okay, slash to-dos, just like that. But first we need to cd into the client and just say npm run build. And before that, I just also realized in the index.html, this should be golang, and here I just have a typo. So that's why it cannot really, oops, it is not this one. It cannot really get this favicon, and it just throws an error that says 404, this image is not found. So let's just update that, and let's say npm run build. Just gonna give us the new dist folder, right? So it's just gonna go ahead and update that. And once that is done, we could commit our changes. And here, these are the changes that we have done. Here we have kind of like ESLint warning. It is not really important, so just ignore that. And add all of them to the staging area. And I'll just say base URL bug fixed. Commit that and sync that up. So once you commit your changes, right, and push that, Railway will immediately see that and it's going to rebuild it. There you go, it says building, and it has just been 8 and 10 seconds. So just wait for this to complete, and once it is done, I'll just be right back. Okay, so there we go, it has just been uploaded. Let's go ahead and see, and there we go, we got the data, it is up and running. We should be able to get this favicon as well. I'll just keep refreshing, and for some reason it is in the cache, but it should update in a couple of minutes. Yeah, it should definitely update it because we have update that file. So let me just double check. If we go into the index.html, oh okay, I again still did the wrong one, so that should be golang, just like that. And you could put another commit, but I think I'll just leave it like that. So there is a typo, that's why it doesn't work. But if you go here, you could mark something as done. It's going to update. You could delete it. You could delete everything basically, or just say add a new to do. Just like that, we could make it done and delete that one as well. And as far as I know, this should be responsive as well. So it's gonna work on your phone completely fine up until like here, which is one of the smallest phones you could ever get. And with that, that's gonna be it for this video. If you want to see more tutorials like this, where we build full stack web apps with Go and React, let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.
Awesome.
So what is ClickUp? ClickUp is an all-in-one productivity software where you can manage everything and anything.
Learn the fundamentals of.
So that was as a programmer, reading that course, right? React and Go API together. It was really good. Some good little fundamentals. I probably didn't need the second half with it being a front end and stuff, but it's still good to do anyway. So we're gonna make this the last video tutorial we're gonna do. This is by on Free Code Camp YouTube, and the course is by Catan Coding. So have a quick look at his thing. 126 videos, quite a lot, crikey. He does quite a lot of videos, releases fairly often. He's been on here for quite a few years. He's working. Yeah, nice video on that one. But yeah, we're going to get into this, so we'll probably get through an hour of this. An hour 15 of this video tutorial, and I'll carry on the rest next time.
Of Go by building a full stack payment application. Go is a powerful and efficient language designed for modern software development. You'll learn everything from basic syntax and data types to advanced features like Go routines and concurrency patterns. Giorgio Tunson developed this course. By the end of this course, you'll have the skills to build robust, high-performance applications using Go.
Hey, what's up everybody? My name is Giorgio and I'm going to be your instructor for this Go programming course. In this course, you're going to learn everything that you need to know to get started programming in the Go programming language. Although Go is a relatively new language, it's quickly becoming one of the more popular languages for large companies to introduce new products and services, and has been used in some very popular technologies such as Kubernetes and Docker. This means that if you're looking for a job, this is a very useful tool to have in your tool belt. In this course, I'll teach you everything that you need to know to get started programming in Go. We're going to go over all of the core concepts in Go, and we're going to build a backend for this beautiful minimalist front-end product store page. Now, the front end or user interface that I just showed you isn't so much going to be what we're going to be focusing on, because Go is primarily a back-end programming language. And by back-end, I mean everything that happens behind this pretty web page to make the process and functionality of purchasing a product possible. So essentially, our focus as back-end engineers is the internal functionality that happens behind the user interface, which is hidden from the user, which happens to be the most important part of any functioning application. Now, if you've never built a website before or you've never coded before, don't worry, I'm going to teach you everything from scratch. And if you're a complete beginner, again, don't worry, I designed this course for anybody interested in learning how to program using the Go programming language. You're not too old and you're not too young. The Go programming language is so compact and minimalist that there's really not much in terms of memorization. And I'm confident that I can help to get you over that initial difficulty curve that most people experience when they're first learning a programming language. I'm super excited to have the opportunity to be able to teach you the Go programming language, so I hope that you stick around and learn this beautiful and powerful programming language.
We'll get through it.
So let's take some time to go over what we're actually going to be building here. So we're essentially going to be creating the backend for this product page. So this product page is essentially a place where a customer can select a product to purchase, and the customer will input their information such as their shipping address and their payment details. And when the customer actually fills out this form and fills out their payment details, we're actually going to send those payment details to a payment processing platform on the back end. And that payment processing platform is called Stripe. And this is Stripe's documentation. You don't have to worry too much about what's happening here now. We're going to get to that soon. But basically, here's a list of test credit cards that we can use to actually test the functionality of our application. So we can use this dummy credit card here, and we can go ahead and put that credit card number into our checkout, and we can put any expiration date and any CVC. And when we select Pay Now, it's actually going to send that request to the backend. So actually, if we bring up our backend here, so I'm currently running our backend server on this system. And if you don't know what I mean by that, don't worry, because we're going to get into all of that. But this is just to give you a general idea of what we're going to be doing. So don't worry too much about this part yet. But yeah, the code that we're going to be writing for the backend server is actually going to be capable of processing real credit card payments. Like, we're actually going to be creating something that could be used in a real world situation. Maybe if you wanted to sell your own product. And since that is the case, you're going to learn a lot about how to protect the customer and security while learning the Go programming language.
That's going to be good.
Okay, so before we get started, there are a couple of things that I should mention. So this entire course is going to be done on Mac OS. It is possible for Windows users to follow this course, but the OS specific instructions are going to be Mac OS. Specifically macOS Monterey version 12.6. And with that being said, the next thing that we need to direct our attention to is the installation of the Go programming language and a code editor. But before we get to that point, we're going to need to go ahead and select our Launchpad. And I want you to type into the search bar the word terminal. And you should see this terminal application, which comes default on all macOS systems. Now, this application is going to be very important. So there are some basics about how to use this that I'm going to need to go over with you before we can install the Go programming language. So let's start by opening this terminal application. Now, throughout this tutorial, whenever you see me making use of this black box, this is the terminal application that I'm using, and you're going to want to become familiar with this application because this application is going to be used for many purposes in the development or programming world. And for this course, you're going to need to follow along with some of the commands that I execute within this black box. And you don't need to have any experience with this. I'm going to walk you through every command that I use, and every time that I make use of this terminal, I'll explain exactly what it is that I'm doing. So for now, let's start with our first command, and we're just going to type cd into this terminal window. So this here, cd, is a command, and it means change directory. So if we go ahead and hit enter, you'll see that nothing really happened because when we type in the cd command without anything after cd, it's just going to move us to the user's home directory. And what I mean by that is this. So our current user is going to be shown here to the left of the @ symbol. So whatever your username is, it's going to be shown here. So that's the current user, right? Typing in cd without anything after it and hitting enter is going to take us to this user's home directory. So if we go ahead and select our Finder here, we should be able to find the current user's home directory. And on Mac, this home directory is hidden from us by default. So we're actually going to change a couple of the settings for our Finder here to make the explanation of this terminal more intuitive. So let's go ahead and make sure we have our Finder open, and then in this bar up here, we're going to click View, and we're going to select Show Path Bar. And what that's going to do is it's going to have a bar down here that's going to show us exactly the path to the folder that we're currently in. So if we select Desktop, it'll show the path down here. So this is our system's HD, and then we're in the users folder, and we're in the Conton user, and we're in this user's desktop. Now this folder here that has the same name as the user, that is the user's home folder. So if we go to users here, you can even see that it has a house in it. This is the home folder for my user here. So if we go into that folder, we'll see all of these folders within that folder, right? If we go back to our terminal here and we type in the command ls, it's going to list the folders in our current directory or the current folder that we're in. And as you can see, these folders here are the same as the folders here. And you might be confused because this library folder shows here, but it doesn't show here. But that's just another annoying thing that macOS does. They hide the library folder from the graphical user interface for some reason. There's a way to make it visible, but I don't feel like trying to figure out how to do that right now. But as you can see, in our terminal, we're currently in my user's home directory. So what cd does is it changes the folder or directory that you're in. So if we want to move into one of these folders, so say for example, we want to move into the desktop folder. Relative to the folder that we're in, we can move to the desktop folder. So we can just type cd and then desktop, since the desktop folder is in our current folder. And this will take us to the desktop folder. And you might get this warning here, just hit OK. And then you can see here what folder you're actually in currently. And if we ls here, we get nothing because in the desktop folder, there's nothing, right? But we can actually create a new folder and call it test. And you can see it shows up on our desktop here because this desktop folder is in fact our desktop. And now in the terminal, since we're in the desktop folder, if we list the contents of this folder, you'll see that this test folder is now here, and we can change directory to test as well. And if we ls in test, you see that there's nothing because in test there's nothing. And if we change directory and we do .. it'll move us back one directory. So now we're back in the desktop folder, and if we do it again, we're back in our home folder. So this tilde here means home directory. So we can actually change to a directory by using the absolute path as well. So we can do change directory tilde, which is home / desktop / test. And this moves us back into this test folder. And if we ls here, we have nothing. But if we add a new test folder inside of here, and let's just rename it to avoid confusion, we'll say test2. If we ls here now, we're now in test, we now can see the test2 folder. So these are the basics of navigating the terminal. So if we type in cd with nothing after it, it's going to take us all the way back to our home folder, the tilde here. And as you can see, when we list the contents, it's the contents of our home folder. So both cd and ls are commands that I'm going to use quite frequently throughout this tutorial. And these are the basic commands that you can use to navigate the file system of your computer via the terminal. Essentially, all this terminal is a way to interact and navigate the operating system without making use of the graphical user interface. Like, the operating system doesn't need all of these pretty windows and application icons and everything to work. You can navigate and run programs within the operating system entirely through the terminal. The graphical user interface, which makes everything look pretty and intuitive, is actually something that's installed on top of the base operating system. But anyways, we're going to make heavy use of this terminal, and we'll learn more about how to use this terminal throughout the rest of this course. So whenever I say to open your terminal or make use of the terminal, you're just going to go to this terminal application. So for now, we can go ahead and close that, but we're going to need to revisit that soon once we install Go. But we can go ahead and move this folder to the trash, and we'll move this to trash as well. And we can go ahead and close the Finder as well. So the next thing that we want to do is we want to install the Go programming language. So with any programming language, in order to make use of it, we need to have it installed onto our system. Now, some programming languages come pre-installed on your system and some don't. And Go isn't one that comes pre-installed on Mac. So we're going to need to go install it ourselves. So we'll open a browser, and actually I can't stand Safari, so I'm just going to download Chrome really quick. So we can just go ahead and open a web browser,
always first step.
And you can just type in Go programming.
It's like, why does Internet Explorer exist or Edge exist?
First
to download
result,
Chrome.
And you can go ahead and select download. Now on this page, you're going to be presented with all of these different options for downloading. So obviously, if you're on Windows, you would use this one. And for Mac users, depending on if you're using an Apple chip or an Intel chip, you would pick one of these. So I'm using an Apple chip, so I'll select ARM64. And Linux, you would use this one. So I'm going to go ahead and select this one.
On Linux, you'd use Pacman
Sometimes
instead, really.
the only thing more difficult than running a business is.
And once the download's complete, I can just use this installer. So I'll just hit continue, install, and put in my password here. And once that's finished, we can go ahead and close. Do you want to move Go Installer to the trash? Yes. And once it's installed, you want to go ahead and open up your terminal again. And you want to type in go -- version. And if everything installed correctly, when you type in this go -- version command, actually I typed in the wrong flag for the command. It's actually just go version. So let's go to the bottom here, and I'll just type go version. And in that case, you should see the version of Go that's installed on your system. So another command that we can use is the clear command, and it's just going to completely clean up our terminal window. And then we can just type go, the go command, and then press enter. And then this is going to tell us all of the sub commands available to the go command. And we'll get to what these do when we need them, but we don't have to go over all of them right now. So I'll go ahead and type clear again to clean things up. Now, just like cd, which is to change directory, and ls, which is to list the contents of the directory, go is also its own command. And all of these commands have their own documentation. So for the commands that come pre-installed in the system, you can type in man and then the name of the command, and it'll show you the documentation for that command. So you'll see here ls command, list directory contents, and it gives you a whole bunch of additional information about flags that you can use to modify the command or make the command do different things. Like for example, this a flag, include directory entries whose names begin with a dot, which are hidden files and directories. So for example, if I ls here, you see that I just get the same contents of my home directory. But if I do ls and then do the a flag, you see that it now shows these files here that have the dot in front of them. So these are like hidden files in your operating system. So you don't need to know what all of these hidden files do. I'm just trying to teach you what these modifiers do to the command. So same with the cd command, we can type in man and then cd, and it'll show some documentation for the cd command. And we can also do man, because man is the command that we're using to show the documentation for each individual command, right? But that in itself is a command as well. And you can see the description, format, and display the online manual pages. But you'll notice that if we type man go, there's no manual entry for Go because we installed Go ourselves. That doesn't come pre-installed on the system. So let me clear this. So for Go, what we can do is you can type in Go and it'll show you the different flags and subcommands available. And if you read here in the documentation for the Go command, you can also use Go help and then the name of the subcommand for more information about that command. So for example, there's go clean, which remove object files and cache files. So if we type go help clean, it'll give us more information about the subcommand clean. So you can see here we typed go help clean and it gives more information. Clean removes object files from package source directories, etc., etc. Now again, you don't need to memorize or know any of this stuff. This is just me trying to get you familiar with how the terminal works. So we just installed Go, so now we have this new command, the Go command. And we're going to be using this Go command throughout the rest of this tutorial. So again, once you've installed Go, if you type in Go version, you should get the version of Go that you installed. If that doesn't work, then it means that you didn't install Go properly. So that's how you install Go. So the next thing that we need to install is a code editor or an IDE. So I can go ahead and close Safari and let's open Chrome again. And we're going to go ahead and type in Goland. And you'll see this JetBrains Goland. You want to select that. And we're going to install the free trial version of Goland. So Goland is actually a paid IDE, but there's a 30-day free trial that we can use, which is more than enough for you to get through this course. And you don't need to bother yourself too much with what IDE is. Just know that this application or this tool is going to be what we use to write and edit our code. So you can see images of its usage here. Like we're basically going to be writing and editing our code inside of this tool. So this isn't a very good comparison, but just think of this as like the Microsoft Word for code. So we're going to go ahead and hit download. And then once it's done downloading, we can go ahead and just move it to our applications folder. And we can open our Launchpad and open Goland. We'll select open. So for those of you on an M1 Mac, you might be asked to install Rosetta, and when you hit install, you might get this installation failure. You can go ahead and hit done, and then just type this command into your terminal. So the command is software update -- install - Rosetta, and then hit enter. and then you'll get this I have read and agreed to the terms, blah, blah, blah. Type A and press return to agree. So you just type A and hit enter. And you should be able to successfully install Rosetta via the terminal this way. Then we'll just hit clear. And once that's installed, you can just open Goland now. And of course you need to sell your soul, then go ahead and continue. And once Goland opens, it's immediately going to open up this second window about licenses. And instead of hitting this activate Goland, we're going to do start trial because we can use a free trial. And if you don't have a JetBrains account, which I assume you don't, we're going to hit register. And you can go ahead and create a JetBrains account. So I'll just use my Google account. Now, once you've registered an account, you should be able to go back to Goland and log into JetBrains account. But as you can see, I've already registered my account and I've already signed up for a free trial. But for you to do the same, you're just going to want to log into JetBrains account. And then once you log in successfully, you should see this authorization successful screen. And then you should be able to go back to the IDE. And then there's a button here that says start trial. And you should be able to just select that button to start your trial. And after that, you should get this message that tells you how long your subscription will be active. And then you can just hit continue. And at that point, you'll be free to use the Goland IDE for 30 days. Now, before we get started, we actually need to do one more thing. So you want to go ahead and open up your terminal again. And we want to type in CD to make sure you're in your home directory. Remember, the tilde means that you're in the home directory. And let's go ahead and open our Finder as well, just so we can see what we're doing. And we'll go to the home folder. So remember, home directory and home folder, they're synonymous. They're the same thing. So if we list the contents here, it's going to be the same as the contents here. So now we're going to introduce a new command called mkdir, and this command stands for make directory. So if we type in the man command and then do mkdir, we can see that this command makes directories, and a directory is just a folder, right? And I forgot to mention this before, but to leave this manual page once you use that man command, you can just type Q. So in our home directory or our home folder, we want to create another folder using this mkdir command, and we'll call that folder go. And then we'll just hit enter, and you can see now that the go folder appears in our home folder. And also if we ls here, it's here as well because they're both the same place. So now we want to change directory into the go folder, and let's clear. And here we can just open the go folder as well. And we want to make 3 more folders, mkdir. The first one we're going to call pkg. The second one we're going to call src. And the third one we're going to call bin. And you don't need to concern yourself with what these folders are for right now. It's not important. Just know that the source folder is where we're going to put our project. So the code that we're writing is going to go in this source folder. But actually, this source folder is supposed to contain all of our projects. So let's say, for example, let's change directory to source. Let's say, for example, we had 3 separate projects. We would have makedir project 1, makedir project 2, makedir project 3. So the source folder, whenever we start a new project in Go, we're going to put a folder for that project inside of this source folder. So in our case, we're just going to make a folder called Go Tutorial. And in this folder is where we're going to put all of our code, which is going to be the code that's going to be the backend for that front-end user interface that I showed you at the beginning of this video, the one where the user or the customer can purchase a product. So remember, we're creating the backend for that user interface, and it'll become more clear what that means as we continue throughout this course. So we can clear this, and actually we can just leave these example projects there just so you can see what I mean by this source directory being where we centralize all of our projects for Go. So now we can close the Finder and we can close the terminal. And what we're going to do is, in Goland, we're going to start a new project. And remember, this new project is in our home folder in the Go source directory. And it seems Goland already knows that, except for the name of the project is wrong. It's not Awesome Project. So we'll go ahead and hit that. And you can see our project in the source directory here, Go tutorial. So the location of our project is in users, your username, the Go folder that we just created, the source folder that we just created, the Go tutorial folder that we just created. And we can go ahead and create this project. Now in the beginning, you're gonna have to wait for it to load up some things, but while it's loading, I just want to explain something. These IDEs, or these code editors, they're very daunting when you first look at them. But honestly, there's like only 30% of the stuff in this code editor we're going to be using. There's so many tools and features and like quality of life stuff in these IDEs. Like a lot of the stuff you might not even use. So you don't need to worry about how daunting it looks or if it looks overwhelming in the beginning. You just need to focus on a couple of key things. So the main thing we want to focus on is this project tab here. So this is our current project. It's the tree structure. It's like the folder structure of our project. So right now, this is the project folder, right? If we expand this, it'll show the file that's inside of the project folder. And actually, this file was just created by the IDE. So I'll show you what I mean by that in a second. But first, I need to explain to you another cool thing that's available in this code editor or IDE. You can actually use the terminal from here. So if we hit this terminal tab, it'll open a terminal here, same as the one that we've been using, but now it's just integrated with the IDE. So if we ls here, we see this Go mod file, and we can also cd, and it'll take us back to our home directory, and we can ls, and we see all of the folders in our home directory, same as before. So our Go directory is where our source folder is, and in our source folder we have our Go tutorial project, and if we ls Go tutorial, we see that this Go mod file is now inside of this Go tutorial project folder. And that's because the IDE or the code editor automatically created this file for us. You don't need to know what this file is for right now, so don't even think about it. Don't worry about it at all. But yeah, this project tab here is basically going to show us the structure, the tree structure containing all of the files. So we could even, for example, create a new Go file here. And for now, we'll just name it main.go. And you can even do simple application. So it'll initialize the file with some code, but it's just like the initial code for creating a application. So we can just go ahead and let it do simple application. So now you can see in our Go tutorial folder, we have this main.go file, and it's a simple application. So it has some code in it already, and you're not going to know what this code means yet, but I'm going to explain all of this in due time. So if we clear our terminal here and we change directory to Go tutorial and we ls again, you can see we now have this main.go file and this Go mod file, same as what's represented here in this tree structure. Now that is the setup. Now we're going to start getting into the fun part, which is actually writing the code for our application.
Yay.
Okay, for starters, let's set up the front end for the back end that we're going to build. So you can go ahead and open up your terminal application here. And once you have that opened up, you can go ahead and open up a web browser and head over to my GitHub page. I'll have it linked in the description. And you want to select this repositories tab. And here you'll see a repository called Go for Beginners Frontend. And what you want to do is select that repository. And on this page, you'll see that there's the instructions for how to set up the front end for this tutorial. So step one, we're going to build the client app. And the client app is just the client for our back end. So it's just the front end for our back end. and then it gives the instructions on how to run the client app or run the front end app, and also gives the URL where you can access that front end that I showed you earlier. So what we want to do is we want to go up here to the top where it says code in green, and you want to click that, and you just want to copy this here. And once you've copied that, you want to go back to your terminal and just type in git clone and then paste in that URL that you just copied. And from there, you should be able to just hit enter, and it should clone that repository or that front-end application to your home directory, because currently we are in our home directory. So if we ls here, we can see that this Go for Beginners front-end folder has been added to our home directory. So now we can just change directory to that Go for Beginners folder, and then we can ls again. And now you can see the contents of the actual repository here that you cloned. These are the contents. So we have a public folder, a source folder, and some files.
Stop using your own money. On developments like this, you'll run out of it.
Those now exist on your local machine in this Go for Beginners front-end folder in your user's home directory. So once again, if we go ahead and hit the Finder here and we access our home directory, and then we access this Go for Beginners front-end folder, these are the contents that you just copied to your system. And these are the files that comprise our front-end application. Now, this front-end application isn't going to be the focus of this course. So basically, the front-end application is already pre-built. So we're not actually going to build this front end. We're only going to build the back end that the front end needs to communicate with, because this is a Go tutorial. So we're building the back end in Go. But for the purposes of actually integrating a front end with the back end that we build, I pre-built this front end that we can use to interface with our back end essentially. So since it's already pre-built, we should actually be able to just run this front end from our machine right now as it is. So we can go ahead and close this, and in our terminal we can clear. And remember, we're still in this Go for Beginners front end folder. Now, in order to run this front end application, we're actually going to need to install a couple of things, a couple of dependencies that are necessary to run this front end, because there are some commands that we need to be able to install to run this. But as I go through this, just remember that these commands that we need to use and these dependencies that we need to install, you don't need to have more than a basic understanding of what we're doing. You don't need to understand what each command is or what dependencies are what. You only need to understand that we're basically installing some things that we need in order to run our front end. And basically from there, everything is already pre-built. So let's just go ahead and attempt to follow the instructions. So these instructions here, let's attempt to follow them. So it's saying that we need to run this command in order to build this app, the front end app. So we can just copy this and paste it into our terminal and hit enter. But as you can see, we get command not found npm. And that's because we don't have Node installed. Now, Node is just one of the dependencies we need to run this front-end application. So actually, if we just copy this and head over to Google and paste that in there and press enter, you can see this Stack Overflow result will tell us, like, if it's not there, install Node.js again. But basically, what I'm trying to say is, the reason I pasted that into Google is just to kind of give you an idea of how you should handle situations where you get stuck in the future. But for now, of course, I'm going to walk you through all of this, but that's just kind of a hint towards the future. But yeah, essentially we need to install Node.js. So install Node.js. Now again, you don't need to know what Node.js is if you're a beginner. You just need to know that we need to install this in order to run the front end. So let's go ahead and select this download Node.js, and I'm going to select the macOS installer. And once I have the installer, I can just select this And using this installer, we can go ahead and install Node.js. And you will need to put in your password. And from there, the installation should be self-explanatory. So we can go ahead and close that. And yeah, we'll go ahead and move that to trash. And now we should be able to do this npm install command. Now you'll see a lot of noise while this npm install command is running, but don't worry about it. As long as you don't get an error, things should be fine. So let's actually just clear this up to make it look cleaner. And we can go back up here and close this Node.js download. And now we did this first step. So the second step is to run the client app. So we should be able to just use this npm start command. So we can copy that and paste it and hit enter. Now you might get something like this. You can just go ahead and allow it. And here we're getting this site can't be reached. So let's go ahead and check our terminal for the issue. Now, as you can see, we have an error here that's not allowing us to actually access our front end or run the front end. And I actually already know what the solution to this error is, so I'll just show you what it is. So what we're going to do is we're going to clear this, and let's just change directory back to our home directory. And here you should type ls lah. And if you don't see a file here that says .zshrc, then you should create that file. So I don't have that file, so I'm going to create it. And you can create it by typing in the command touch, and then you can just put .zshrc and then hit enter. And if you ls lah.zshrc, you'll see that we now have this file that exists in our home directory. So now I just want you to type in the command cat, and after cat you're going to type quote export node options equals dash dash open SSL legacy provider, and then end quote. Now here you don't need to know what this is doing. This isn't a part of the tutorial at all. This is just the initial setup that we need to do. So after you type that, you want to put an arrow and then space, and let me make this wider so you don't get confused by it looking like it's on a new line. It's on the same line. Then you put .zshrc, and then there you should press enter. And actually I just had a complete brain glitch. We're not using the cat command. We should be using the echo command. So we're going to type in the exact same thing that we just typed, but instead of cat, we're going to type in the word echo and then press enter. And to confirm that this worked correctly, if you type in cat.zshrc, it should show this export that we just wrote in this initial echo command. And once you do that, you should be able to just type source.zshrc and then hit enter. And lastly, you want to type in env pipe grep node and then hit enter. And you should see this node options equals open SSL legacy provider. Now, I know that was a lot, but you don't need to understand any of what we just did. This is just preparation for being able to run the front-end application. So if you can just follow the instructions as I presented them, then you should be fine. Now we should be able to clear here, and we want to change directory back to the Go for Beginners front-end directory. And once again, we should try step 2 of the instruction. So this one here, npm start. And this should work now.
All right, let's see what the boss man said. We need to chat on this. I have bent over backwards for you day in.
So now, as you can see, we have our front end running as expected. So if we go ahead and enlarge this, you can see we have our products here, and we can select a product. So we should be able to input a address here. And from there, we should be able to hit next. And here at the point where we reach the checkout, we shouldn't be able to do anything yet because we haven't implemented the backend that needs to be called in order for a customer to check out and make the payment. But if you're able to reach this point, then you've successfully set up your front end for the back end that we're going to build using the Go programming language. So for now, we can just close this and we can close this as well. And here, the front end application is going to be running. So you just want to press Control-C and that will stop it from running. And you'll get back to the command prompt and you can type in clear. And yeah, we've set up the front end, so now it's time to start building the back end for the front end. Now let's take a couple of minutes to actually explain what we're building here. Up until this point, you'll notice that there are some keywords that I've been using that you may or may not understand yet. And those words are server, graphical user interface, front end, and back end. Now, a server we can just think of as a physical computer, and we'll get back to that later on in the course. A graphical user interface, or GUI, is the interface that a user uses to interact with an application or web application. So if we think of the word interface in a general sense, it's really just a device or system that two unrelated entities can use to interact. For example, two people from entirely different countries can communicate or interact with one another via a shared language. That language serves as the interface between the two people. Similarly, a human can interact with a computer via the buttons and navigation tools in an application or on a web page. Those graphical buttons and navigation tools serve as the interface between a person and a computer, more specifically, the graphical user interface. Now, the graphical user interface is the part of the application that the user can see. This part of the application is called the front end. But in the deepest and darkest depths of the application, in a place where no user has gone before, there exists the core functionality of the application, which is not visible to the user. This is called the backend. And all of the code that comprises this backend generally exists on a server. So that means that the front end needs to be able to communicate or interface with the backend server, right? So our backend needs to provide an interface for the front-end application to use so that these two entities can communicate with one another. Now, so far, we've learned how the two entities, human and computer, can interact. And that's via a graphical user interface, right? Because a human can easily navigate a GUI using buttons and text inputs, etc., and those interactions are relayed to the computer. So we understand how a human interfaces with a computer, but how does a computer interface with another computer? Well, a computer interacts with a computer by making use of an interface as well. This interface is called an application programming interface and is more commonly referred to as an API. Now, an API is a type of software interface, and it just so happens to be what we're going to be writing the code for or building in this course. So we'll be creating the interface that the front end will use to interact with our back end, and through that interface, the front end will be able to trigger certain functionality related to a customer purchasing a product from an online store. Okay, so after everything we've learned up until this point, you should have a firm understanding of what part of the application we're building here. So let's go ahead and open Goland, and you'll recall that we made this main.go file in our Go tutorial directory when we were going over how this IDE works. And if you haven't created that file, you can just right click on the Go tutorial folder and then go to new and then hit Go file. And here, you're just going to name the file main, and I'm pretty sure it should automatically add the file extension .go. And remember, you want to select simple application when you create the file, so it'll automatically populate the file with this initial code. So yeah, with everything that we've learned up until this point, you should understand that the part of the application that we're building is the code, the backend code that's going to run on the backend server. And that code is going to be the application programming interface, or API, that the front end is going to use to communicate with the backend or interface with the backend. And that project, or that server code, or that API code is all going to be contained within this project Go tutorial. So all of the code that we're writing for this backend is going to be in this Go tutorial folder, which is the project folder at Go source Go tutorial. So now we can start getting into how a Go program actually works. Like, what is a Go program? What is a Go application? Essentially, the application is this file, this main.go file, and the code contained within this file is the code for the application. So essentially what we're going to be able to do is we're going to be able to write some code here, and we're going to be able to run this file. And when we run the file, the code that we have written inside of the file is going to be executed. So let me just show you what I mean by that. And you don't need to understand what this package main func main means yet. So for now, let me just show you something. So if we write in these brackets, this fmt print line, and we put inside of it hello world, we've now written some code inside of this main.go file. So if we run this file, and don't worry about this was automatically added by Golang. I'll explain to you what this import format does as well. But first, I just want to show you something. So this main.go file, if we run this file, it should print hello world. Like, print means it's just going to print something to the terminal. So that's the function of this print line. It's just going to print something to the terminal. And what we want to print, we can put it inside of these parentheses. So if we wanted to print hello world, we just type hello world inside of these parentheses. And when we run this file, it's going to print hello world. So if we open our terminal, and we can make this a little bit larger, if we ls here, you see our main.go file is here because we're in the Go tutorial folder. So we're in this folder, right? So we can see our main.go file. And if you recall, we installed the Go command. The Go command is what we installed. And if you recall further, the Go command has its own subcommands. So if we go ahead and enlarge this for a second, and we just type Go and hit enter, and we scroll up here, you'll see that Go has these commands. So there's this list of commands here, right? And one of these commands is called run. And it says here that it will compile and run a Go program. Now, right now, you don't need to know what compile means, but run a Go program is pretty self-explanatory. It's going to run the program. And if we scroll up a little bit here, we can see how to use these subcommands. So the usage is here. So first we'll type Go, which is the Go command that we installed, and then whatever subcommand that we want to use, and then arguments. Now, in this case, we're going to type Go, and then the subcommand that we want to use from this list is going to be run, and the argument is going to be the Go file that we want to run. So if we go back to the bottom here, and let's just clear so we have some space, and we can ls here so you can see we have our main.go file here with the code here that's going to print hello world, right? So if we type Go run and then the file name main.go, and then we hit enter, you see that hello world gets printed to the terminal screen, because that's what function we wrote here. That's what we're doing in the code within this file. So this Go run main.go is equivalent to like when you run an application on your operating system. Like if you click one of the application's icons, it'll start up the application, right? That's the same thing Go run is doing. Like, you can just imagine this main.go file is one of these applications, but there's just no icon for it. And when we type Go run in the name of the file, we're essentially clicking the application and starting the application. So that's like a really simple explanation for what's happening here. So our main.go file is the application, right? And we could actually name this whatever we want. We can go in here and we can hit refactor, rename, and we can name this hello.go and refactor it. And now here we would type go run hello.go because that's the name of the file now, right? If we ls here, we renamed the file to hello.go. So we can go run hello.go. And it will still be the same code because we didn't change the code here. But if we change the code here to hello my friend, and then we go run hello.go, you see that what prints to the screen changes to hello my friend. So that's the basics of how an application in Go actually works. We essentially write the code inside of a file with the extension .go, and we can run that file to actually run the application. Now, there are some other things in here that you might be a bit confused about. So let me explain. So first of all, we have this function here, this func main, this is called a function. So if you look at this line here that says func main, this is the name of the function, and everything in between these brackets are the instructions for that function. So we can even do this multiple times. So we can even print 4 times within this one function. So it means that whenever we run this function that's called main, it's going to print this to the screen 4 times. So if we hit the terminal again and we do go run hello.go, you see that it prints 4 times, right? So this is a function. So we could actually go ahead and create another function if we wanted to. We can do func, and then we can name the function whatever we want. So I'll just name it my function, and any instructions inside of this function would be executed if I were to run this function. So what do I mean by run this function? So I can actually take this and cut it from my main function, and I can just put it in my function. So now these instructions are grouped into my function. And actually, let's just change this to step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. And I just did that because it shows you that when you run a function, the instructions are ran in order. So this one, step 1 will be printed first, step 2 will be printed second, step 3 and 4, etc. So this function is just, a function is just a set of instructions. It's just grouping together instructions. So basically now our func main, from our func main, we can actually run another function. So from inside of a function, we can call or run another function. So we can actually do my function, and this is how you actually run a function or invoke a function. So you put the name of the function, and then you put these parentheses here to invoke the function. So when we actually run this main function, it's going to call this function, which is going to run all of the steps in here. So if we open up the terminal and we do go run hello.go again, you see that it prints out step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. And what just happened here is a key thing that you need to understand. So whenever you run the hello.go file, this is automatically going to call this main function. It's not calling my function. My function is being called from the main function. So if we don't run this main function, my function won't even be called. So to show that, let me remove this invocation or this call to my function from the main function. So now when we run the file, nothing's going to get printed to the screen because this my function isn't getting called from the main function. And when you run the file, only the main function is called. If we run this file, my function won't be called automatically. Only the main function will be called. So if we go ahead and clear and we go run hello.go, you see nothing gets printed. And that's because we didn't call my function in main. Now, this brings me to the important point. this main function, we can't change the name of this function. Like, this function isn't our function to change. This is the entry point to the application. So every Go application needs to have this main function. It's essentially you're telling Go where the application instructions start. So the entry point is the main function. So regardless of what you name the file, you have to have the main function inside of the file. If we were to delete this and try and run the file with just my function in it, it wouldn't work. So when we try to run it, as you can see, it says function main is undeclared in the main package, which brings me to the other thing that's important about Go, the main package. Every Go application has to have a main package. Now, I know you don't know what a package means, so let me explain. So we can go ahead and undo that deletion. Now, at the top of the file, you see package main. So this is the starting point of any Go application. You need the main package on the first line of the file. And to explain what a package is, I think it's best for us to just create our own package so you can see how it works. So let's see if we can do that. So if we go ahead and create another folder inside of our Go tutorial folder, so we'll do new directory, and we'll just name it test, and then we hit enter. We now have another folder inside of our project directory called test. And in here, we can create a Go file and just call it test. Now the IDE is trying to create a main package for this folder, but that's actually incorrect. You can only have one main package in a Go program. So essentially a package is just like a package of code. So like a package of functions that can be used if that package is imported. So let me explain what I mean. So let's say that we have this package here called test. All of the files that we create inside of this test package will contain the code, and all of that code comprises the test package. So let's go to our hello.go file, and let's just take this my function out of it. Let's copy it. And then let's go put it into this test file. And we also need to delete this main function, and we need to change the package name to test. And actually, let's name this test package. And we'll just refactor and rename this one to test package as well. So this is a package here, right? We created a package. So this folder is our package, right? And there's some code in this package. So we have a function in this package, and the function in this package will just print step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. Now in Hello Go, we can import that package. So we can type in import and quotes, and remember the name of our project is Go Tutorial. So that means that Go Tutorial is part of the path to the package. So you can see here, it'll automatically show up as Go Tutorial / test package as the location of this package. So if we select that, we're now importing test package. So if we go here in our main function, we can type test package, and then we can do my function. But there's a problem here as well. So if we hover over my function, you can see down here on the bottom left of the screen, it says unexported function my function usage. So basically it's saying we're trying to use this function from test package that we created here. We're trying to use this function, but we didn't export it. And exporting it just means that from within our package, we allow other packages to use our function. Now in Go, the way that you allow other packages to use a function is very simple. You just make sure the name of the function has a capital letter for the first letter. So if we change my function to capital M my function, the function is now being exported. Like now other packages can use test packages my function. So if we go back to hello.go and we change this to what it's actually called, because right now it's not working because we changed the name of the function, right? So now we're trying to call a function called my function with a small m from test package, but there is no function called my function with a small m in the test package because it's big M. So that's something important to note. Like case sensitivity is very important in programming. So if we go here and we change this to capital M my function, now we have no more errors. So here we're importing this test package that we created. And since we imported it, we can do test package, that we can do the name of the package dot the name of the function in the package. And if we go ahead and run this, if we go to the terminal and let's clear this and let's ls again. So you can see we have our test package here, right? And we still have our hello.go file. If we do go run hello.go, you see it prints 1, 2, 3, 4 because we're calling test packages function from our main function. Now you might be wondering, like, what's the point of all this confusion with these packages? But it's really important that we organize our code. So a very simple explanation. This is the only explanation you need right now for the reasoning behind like using packages is we want to segregate specific types of functionality. For example, maybe we might create a package that's only responsible for like arithmetic, and then we create a separate package that's only responsible for something completely unrelated to arithmetic. Like we just want to keep everything organized. So that's a very simple explanation of why we might want to use packages. For now, that's all you need. So back to our hello.go file. So I said before, hello.go is the entry point to our application. And the entry point means that it's the starting point of the application. So this is the start of our application. So anything that we put in this main function, it's going to comprise all of the steps in our application. So maybe we want to call my function many times in our main function. Just think of the main function as the parent function to any other code that gets ran in your application. And import is the keyword that we use to import another package. Now, circling all the way back to what package main is the entry point package to the application. So you can really just think of it like this. The same way that we're importing test package and running it here, the same way that we're doing that, you can imagine that when we run this go run hello.go, the Go programming language, under the hood, it's importing our main package and it's calling our main function. And that's how it's executing our application. That's how it's running our application. So that's what the main package is. And the main function is the entry point, the start of our code, the start of the application. I hope that makes sense because that's very important for you to understand. So at this point, you should have an understanding of what a function is. So remember, this is a function, and the keyword for a function is func. When we want to create a function, we'll type in func and then the name of our function. And if we want to create a function that's public for other packages to use, it has to have a capital letter at the beginning of the function name. And if we want the function to be private, like we only want it to be accessible from inside of our package, we make the first letter lowercase. So this is my private function. So nobody can use this function outside of our package. So if we go to hello.go and let's delete that, and we do test package dot my private function, you see that we get the error unexported function my private function, meaning we can't use this function from the main package. So yeah, that is what a function is, and that is what the main package and the main function is. Those things are very important to understand. Now there's one more thing I want to explain as well. So let me just delete this because we can't do that. So if we go back to this test file, you see here that we're importing this FMT package. Now this package, we didn't create this package, right? And you might be wondering where this package came from. And we're using this package here. See, the package name is FMT, and we're calling this package's function called printLine. Same way that we were calling this test package's my function. We're doing the exact same thing here. We're calling format, the package format. We're calling its function that's called printLine. And you can see it's a capital P because it's a exported function. It's usable by other packages. But you're probably wondering where format came from. And format is actually part of Go's standard library. So Go has a standard library of many useful packages that it has functions for common things that you do in the programming world, like printing something to the terminal is a very common thing that we do in the programming world. So it's a function available in one of Go's packages, and that package is part of Go's standard library. So there's many packages in Go standard library. We don't need to memorize any of them or know any of them until we need to use them. So right now, it's okay to only know about the format package. Like, we used it, right? So you know about it, but you don't need to sit around and try and memorize things that you're not using. Whenever you're trying to find some functionality, you'll end up needing to search for if it's available in Go standard library anyway. So there's no use in trying to memorize all of this stuff. Just know that when we're importing format here, we're not importing our own package that we made. We're importing one of Go's package that they made. Now, there's another thing that we need to go over as well as part of the basics here. So as you can see here, we're able to pass in an argument to this print function. So basically it prints whatever we ask it to print. And that's because we're passing an argument to the function. Which brings me to the next thing that we need to learn about, and that is function parameters or arguments. So it's basically just a way to add more functionality or customization to a function. Like, for example, right now, when we call my function, we have no control over what gets printed here, right? Like, we have no control. Like, it's always going to print step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. We can't control that. But the creator of the function can actually allow the person that calls the function to change what gets called here. And we do that by adding parameters to the function definition. Now, let me take a step back before I explain adding parameters to the function definition. So I just mentioned that when we call this function, we have no control over what's being printed. And since we're actually the creators of this function and the callers of this function, so here we're creating this function, and in hello.go we're actually calling this function, it's kind of hard to distinguish between the creator and the caller because we're both in this case. So when I say that when we call this function, we have no control over what's printed, I want you to imagine that as the caller of the function, here we're the caller of the function, like we're importing this function from this package and then we're calling it. I want you to imagine that as the caller of the function, we're not the creator of the function. And what I mean by that is, if we go to this test package, we're calling this print line function from this FMT package, right? But we didn't write this FMT package. So if this print line function doesn't give us the option to pass in an argument to print, since we're not the ones responsible for creating this function, we wouldn't have any control over that. So that's what I mean when I say when we call this function, we have no control over what's being printed here. Because this function gives no option to pass in any parameters to impact what's being printed. Like, of course, we can go ahead and alter this function to change what's being printed, but I'm talking about when we call the function, we have no way of impacting what's being printed, because when we call this function, these instructions are executed. So I just want you to differentiate in your mind between the calling of the function and the actual function definition. I want you to imagine that a separate person is creating this function definition from the person that's actually calling it. So in that case, we have no control over what my function does, because we're imagining that we're not the ones who created this function. We're just imagining that we're importing the package and we're using this function. Similar to what we're doing here. We have no way of altering the way that this print line function works. We can import it and make use of it, but the way that it's supposed to be used is defined in the actual function definition, which we didn't have any part in making. So we just need to conform to the constraints of the function that's provided to us. So that's what I mean when I say we have no way to alter what's being printed here when we call my function. I hope that makes sense. But as the creators of my functions, so now I want you to change roles in your mind. Now we're the creator of my function, right?
Job done. Perfect. So we have a Beautiful. 31,793.32.
And maybe somebody else wants to use my function. So maybe somebody wants to import our package and use this my function. So as the people that actually defined this function, remember the func keyword is where we're defining the function. If they want to use our function, we can give them the power to alter what's being printed here by way of arguments, and we define them as function parameters. So if we were to add some parameters into these parentheses, for now we'll just add one parameter. For example, we can add the parameter step and we can put int here. Now you don't know what this int means yet, but don't worry about it yet, we'll get to it. But we're adding this parameter here, step. So that means that the caller of the function, which in this case is us, but let's imagine that somebody else is using our package and calling this function. Now they're going to be required to provide an argument. Now you might be confused, like argument, parameter, what's the difference? And there really is no difference. So the parameter is what we define when we're defining our function. So when we're creating the function, we'll call it parameter. When we're creating the function, when we're defining these parameters that can be passed to the function. And when we're calling the function, we call it an argument. Like we're passing the argument to fulfill the parameter from the function definition. So sometimes you'll hear the word parameter and argument used interchangeably, so it might be confusing sometimes. But basically, the argument is what's being passed into the function, and the parameter is the definition of what can be passed into the function. So when we're writing the function, we're adding this step parameter. But when we're calling the function, we're passing in an argument to fulfill the step parameter. So if we go back to this my function, we see that there's a step parameter, and after we have this int word, it looks like there's two parameters, right? But this is only one parameter, and this int is just the data type of the parameter. For example, if we wanted two parameters, we'd put a comma, and we can just put another parameter, and this will be int2. So this is how we add multiple parameters to a function that we're defining. So each parameter is separated by a comma. So before it seemed like this was two parameters because we have step int, but int is just the type of the step parameter, and int is integer. So it means that the type of step needs to be an integer. And it's going to be a bit confusing right now because I haven't taught you about types yet, but just bear with me, I'm going to get to it. So let's just stick with doing one parameter here, and it's called step, and the type needs to be an int. So if we go back to hello.go, you see that we're getting an error here because we need to pass an integer, a number, like a step into the function. And at this point, we can start getting into the basic data types of Go. So in Go and any other programming language, we're able to define variables. And in Go, we do that using the keyword var, which stands for variable. And we're going to use var to define a variable. So we do the var keyword and we put the name that we want the variable to be. Like we put the name of the variable. What do we want to call it? Like how are we going to reference it in our code? And after the name of the variable, we put the type of the variable. So the data type of the variable. And following the type, we assign a value to the variable by using the equal sign. So in this case, we'll say that we're creating the variable called step, and it's an integer. And the value that we want to assign to that variable is 1. Now, what does this mean? So basically, this means that we're storing this value 1 in memory, like we're saving it in memory. And in order for us to reference it later on, we're giving it a name. So for example, right now you'll see that we're getting an error here because it says unused variable step. So like we're storing this value 1 in memory, but we're never referencing it because we're never referencing the variable name. But if we add step into here, now the variable is being used and we're no longer getting that error. So what does this mean? This means that whenever we reference this variable step, it's going to be the value 1 and it's a type integer. So since we're passing step to my function, we're actually passing the value 1 to my function. So defining a variable is just saving a value in memory and giving it a name. And we have to specify the type of the variable. So if we go to my function now, since we're passing in the value 1 as step, we can use what's called a conditional statement to decide which one of these steps we want to print. So we can do if step equals 1.
Before I get some more of that, I'm going to call it for tonight. So we're going to leave off there. We'll pick up again next week. It'll be episode 3. We'll try and smash out this tutorial. It's going to be 3.5 hours, or 3.25 hours. See if we can smash this all out in the next live stream next week. Thanks so much to FreeCodeCamp YouTube channel and Catan Coding. I forgot the guy's name. I think it was Sergio, but let me check that. I think his name. Catan Coding, but what's his name? What's up? No, can't find his name on here. But anyway, yeah, thank you, Catan Coding, and thank you, FreeCodeCamp. That's going to be it for tonight. So next week, don't forget, newsletter coming out on Saturday. YouTube video going up on Friday. Newsletter streams on Monday, and then the follow-up to this Learning Go is next Wednesday. So I'll see you there.